We want to restore the Department of Justice to an institution that focuses on fighting law and order and crime and putting real criminals behind bars, not targeting Americans because of their religion or their political speech. We saw that under the previous administration, and it's unacceptable to this president.
The military is not supposed to be used for ordinary law enforcement purposes. In D.C., he was talking about cleaning up the graffiti and, dealing with the blight of homelessness, which are obviously local, not federal issues. And he's trying to militarize our society, intimidate his political opponents. The whole idea of picking cities based on their partisan leadership is absurd. I mean, there are lots of Republican cities and towns struggling with crime. Everybody is across the country. Always. Crime has always been part of our history, and yet crime is down. In D.C., for example, it's at a 30-year low. It's down in Baltimore. It's down in Chicago. But the point is that in our system of federalism, the different branches of government and the different departments of government are supposed to work together. If Donald Trump thinks he's got some great ideas for Chicago or Miami or Houston, Texas or whatever, he should call a summit for the White House and say, hey, here's some ideas where the feds can work together with states and localities, not have a series of rolling National Guard invasions of people's cities.
Reportedly, the objective is about crime. What do you think his objective is in doing this?
Well, one thing he's clearly doing is changing the subject from a different form of crime, which is child sex trafficking, which Jeffrey Epstein was a mastermind of, that Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of and sentenced to jail for 20 years of, and Donald Trump's name apparently appears throughout the Epstein file. He had run on a platform promising to release the Epstein files. Then he had 1,000 FBI agents searching through the files, poring over them to look for his name, to look for photographs, to look for video glimpses of him. And then when they came back and reported him, he said, we're not releasing this. And we have a strong bipartisan majority in Congress demanding the release of the Epstein files. So this is a convenient and irrelevant distraction from that for him. But I think, look, there are significant levels of criminality taking place within his own administration, right? There's a lot of corruption taking place. So all of this.
But Americans also, they do have concerns about crime, even if you look at statistics showing that it's going down.
Nobody more than the mayors and the council people and the police.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker lashing out at President Trump yesterday, calling the president's comments to bring law and order. He had called it illegal, unconstitutional, and un-American. Listen.
Over the weekend, we learned from the media that Donald Trump has been planning for quite a while now to deploy armed military personnel to the streets of Chicago. This is exactly the type of overreach that our country's founders warned against. What President Trump is doing is unprecedented and unwarranted. It is illegal. It is unconstitutional. It is un-American.
The racist mayor of Chicago, who is being investigated for his bigoted hiring practices, said that the efforts by President Trump to deploy the Illinois National Guard to protect the people of Chicago from rampant violent crime was somehow racist. The mayor neglected to define what race he thought criminals are. Let's discuss with the Chris Salcedo Show's Legal Eagles, former U.S. Attorney, Washington, D.C., and former Chief Counsel for the Senate Rules Committee, Joe DeGenova, and former Chief Counsel for the Senate Intelligence Committee and former Senior Justice Department official, Victoria Tunsing, both Newsmax contributors. Hello, you two. Joe, Pritzker also claimed that he lives rent-free in President Trump's head. Watch.
We're very pleased about the progress that we're making. I know that I live rent-free in the president's head, and I wish he would spend some time in Chicago so that he could see what a lovely city we have.
Yeah, and it pans right up to the Trump building. He said this after he bashed his own Illinois National Guard, suggesting that their mission of protecting citizens of Chicago was somehow unlawful, unconstitutional. You heard him, un-American. Joe, what does the law say about a president's ability to deploy the National Guard to protect our people?
Well, when there is a threat to public safety and an emergency, the president, even without the consent of the governor of a state, can deploy military troops, including the state's National Guard, to a city to protect federal facilities like federal buildings, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the U.S. Courthouse, and to protect federal officials like judges, federal prosecutors, and ICE agents and other people. So he's simply wrong. It's not illegal. It's not unconstitutional. I think what you see being displayed here is the kind of ignorance and overreach that demonstrates why so many businesses and people are leaving Illinois and Chicago.
The National Guard troops and the Marines have been in LA over the last 2 months, engaged in perimeter support, in blockades, in one instance, apprehending and arresting civilians, and all part of civilian law enforcement, which is absolutely prohibited under the Posse Comitatus Act. They are engaged in infringing upon and blocking the freedom of movement of Americans on American soil. And we will hear from military personnel that we deposed that say all this. And so we think we have a really strong case.
So never ever forget that the same man talking about sending in the troops to clean up the cities and get rid of all the crime is literally a 34-time convicted felon and would have been a 91-time convicted felon had he either lost the election or if Merrick Garland wouldn't have screwed it all up and not delayed the process. You know, we've been talking about this obviously on TYT since it's been happening, since Trump has sent in, you know, troops into LA, into DC, talking about sending them in Chicago and New York City, all the heavily blue cities and all the cities that have heavier black populations, and that Fox News and other outlets like that are always talking about, oh, look at how bad crime is in these areas, even though they, you know, love and worship a convicted felon, but I already said that. But, you know, that's not a novel approach to sending more troops and bash people's heads in. That's not going to do anything. That's not going to fix the real issues and where crime stems from. But I think that it's pretty obvious that Donald Trump is just distracting from his own BS, from his own failings and his own shortcomings. You know, prices are going up, produce, the prices of meat, different types of imports. And he's clearly not going to back away from these tariffs. So as the cost of living continues to rise, as more and more of his promises go undelivered upon, as his approval ratings continue to drop, and he can deny that all he wants, but as that happens, and let's not forget he's also distracting from Jeffrey Epstein and his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell came out recently and she told the DOJ that both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are completely innocent when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, which of course nobody believes. That's what he's doing this for. Unfortunately, he's causing a lot of damage in the process, but you know, you can't distract from the fact that you suck, man. You really can't.